Imagine living in a country where silver is so common that people barely react when they see it. You drop a few silver coins on the ground. Nobody rushes to pick them up. That's the kind of wealth connected to Solomon's kingdom. And the strange part is, this wasn't some giant empire like Rome or Egypt. Israel was relatively small. Still, during Solomon's reign, money, trade, and luxury started flowing into Jerusalem at a ridiculous scale. Gold arriving from foreign lands, caravans entering the city loaded with expensive goods, foreign visitors showing up with gifts, construction happening everywhere. The place was growing fast, and once you start looking into it properly, Solomon stops feeling like just a biblical figure. He starts looking more like the ruler of a booming economic state. That's the part people don't usually talk about. Most conversations around Solomon focus on wisdom, the baby story, the proverbs, the famous judgment scenes. But the economy behind his kingdom was just as interesting, maybe even more interesting, because when you strip away the ancient setting for a second, a lot of this starts feeling familiar. A country finds economic opportunity. Trade explodes. The capital becomes wealthy. Big projects start appearing everywhere. The government becomes more powerful. And eventually, ordinary people start feeling the pressure underneath all the success. That pattern shows up constantly throughout history. And Solomon's kingdom may be one of the earliest examples of it. The story really starts with David. Before Solomon became known for building things, David became known for fighting wars, and those wars changed Israel completely. By the time Solomon inherited the throne, Israel was in a much stronger position than it had been years earlier. The borders were more secure, enemies had been pushed back, trade routes were safer, and that kind of stability changes a country fast. Farmers can focus on farming instead of survival. Merchants can move goods more freely. Markets grow, cities expand, money starts moving. David created the conditions. Solomon took advantage of them. And Solomon seems to have understood pretty quickly that Israel wasn't going to become powerful by trying to outfight the bigger kingdoms around it. That would have been difficult. Instead, he leaned heavily into trade, which honestly made a lot of sense. Israel sat near major routes connecting different parts of the ancient world. Goods moving between Egypt, Arabia, Africa, and the Eastern empires passed through nearby regions all the time. So while larger kingdoms focused on military power, Solomon focused on movement. Movement of goods, movement of merchants, movement of money. And over time, Jerusalem started turning into a serious economic center. Imagine entering the city during Solomon's reign. You'd probably see merchants from different regions speaking different languages, camels carrying spices, fabrics, wood, and gold, crowded markets, construction workers everywhere, officials moving through the streets. The city must have felt alive. One of Solomon's smartest political moves was building a relationship with Hiram, king of Tyre. Now Tyre was a trading powerhouse. The Phoenicians were famous sailors and merchants. These people dominated Mediterranean trade. So instead of competing with them, Solomon partnered with them. And that partnership brought in huge amounts of wealth. Ships started moving goods across long distances. Gold came in, silver came in, rare materials came in, luxury items came in. Jerusalem kept growing richer. And once rulers become wealthy, they usually start building things. Solomon definitely did. The temple became the most famous project connected to his reign. According to the biblical descriptions, it was covered in gold and filled with expensive materials brought from different places. But the temple wasn't only about religion, it was also a statement. Big buildings have always been used that way. Even now, powerful countries build massive structures partly to show strength and influence. Solomon's kingdom was doing the same thing. The message was clear. Israel had become important. But huge projects cost huge amounts of money. And eventually, somebody has to carry that weight. The Bible talks about labor forces being used for Solomon's building projects. Workers cutting stone, workers transporting materials, workers building structures across the kingdom. At the same time, more wealth kept flowing toward the capital and the royal court. And while the kingdom looked successful from the outside, pressure was slowly building underneath everything. That usually happens in fast-growing economies. At first, prosperity hides the strain. People tolerate heavy systems when money is flowing, but over time, the burden becomes harder to ignore. And from the outside, Solomon's kingdom probably looked incredible. Trade was booming. Foreign leaders visited Jerusalem. Gold filled the royal court. The city expanded. Everything looked successful. But sometimes the moment a system looks strongest is when the pressure underneath is already growing. The richer the kingdom became, the more expensive it became too. More projects, more spending, more labor, more demands. And eventually, ordinary people started feeling it. You can almost picture workers standing near these giant buildings thinking, "We're building all of this. But who's really benefiting from it?" That frustration didn't appear overnight. It probably built slowly over years. Then Solomon died. And that's when things started breaking apart very quickly. His son Rehoboam inherited the throne. Not long after, people came to him with a simple request. They basically told him, "Your father placed heavy burdens on us. Make things easier, and we'll support you." That moment says a lot. It tells you the tension was already there before Solomon died. The wealth was real. The success was real too. But so was the pressure underneath it. Rehoboam rejected the request. According to the biblical account, he responded aggressively instead. And that decision shattered the kingdom. The northern tribes split away. The united monarchy broke in two. One generation earlier, Israel had looked stronger than ever. Now it was divided. And honestly, that's probably the most interesting part of this whole story. Solomon's kingdom didn't collapse because it lacked wealth. It collapsed while surrounded by wealth. That's what makes it feel so modern, because history keeps repeating this pattern. A society grows richer, power becomes more concentrated, large projects expand everywhere, success becomes expensive to maintain, and eventually, cracks start showing. That doesn't erase what Solomon achieved. His kingdom became one of the most influential states in the region during its peak. But the story also shows something else. Building wealth and holding a society together are not always the same thing. Sometimes those two things move in completely different directions, and thousands of years later, people are still trying to figure out how to balance them.